Hello friends, in this video we are going to see the various psychrometric processes. Let us start with that. So there are basically 8 processes which are nothing but the sensible heating, sensible cooling, humidification, dehumidification, cooling and humidification, heating and humidification, and heating and dehumidification. We'll see one by one. So the first one is the sensible heating. So in case of sensible heating, basically the heating is taking place at a constant specific humidity and dBT increases, dry bulb temperature increases. Okay, so we'll see this particular process on the psychrometric chart. So assume that you have the initial point somewhere over here. Okay, this is the initial point, let's say the point number 1, and during the sensible heating the specific humidity remains constant throughout the process. Okay, initial condition and the final condition, the specific humidity will remain same. So it's a horizontal line, basically it's a perfectly horizontal line over here. Okay, it's a perfectly horizontal line over here. Assume that the process is taking place up to this particular point. So this is the initial point, this is the final point. So this process is nothing but the sensible heating. This is the sensible heating where the specific humidity remains constant, whereas the dry bulb temperature will increase from point number 1 to point number 2. Okay, so by looking at this particular diagram, the dry bulb temperature initially it was 26 degrees Celsius, which has increased to 34 degrees Celsius at point 2. Okay, so this process is nothing but the sensible heating. Fine. Now the next one is the sensible cooling. Again, it's similar to that of the heating process. The only thing is, instead of heating, the cooling is done over here. Okay, so let's say this is the point number 1 over here, and if I want to go for the sensible cooling, the process will be horizontal line only. However, the temperature is dropping down. Okay, so this is the inlet condition. At outlet, the temperature will be less than the inlet condition temperature. So assume that this process is taking place from this point to this point over here. So this is let's say I'm pointing the point number 3. So this process from point number 1 to point number 3 is the sensible cooling. It's the sensible cooling. So initially the temperature was 26 degrees Celsius, and due to sensible cooling, temperature has reached to, let's say, 18 degrees Celsius. However, during this entire process of sensible cooling, the specific humidity was remain constant. Fine. So this is the sensible cooling process. Then you have the humidification. Okay, so during humidification, basically the what you can say, the moisture is added into the air. Okay, the moisture is added into the air. That is done with the help of, let's say, by adding the spray of water, okay, to the air, dry air. Basically, let's say you have this particular chamber, something like this, then you will have the humidifier over here. Okay, that will be spraying the water, and this is the air stream. Okay, so in the stream of air, this water will be sprayed, and because of this spraying of water, the humidification will be done. In this process, the dry bulb temperature of air will remain same. However, the humidity increases. Okay, the specific humidity increases. So if I am going to keep the dry bulb temperature constant, it means the line will be the vertical, and specific humidity is increases. Okay, so here you can see towards upward, the specific humidity goes on increasing. So let's say this is the initial point, let's say point number 1. From point number 1, if I go for the humidification process, the process will be something like this. Okay, up to this point, let's say the point number 4, will be having the humidification. This is what the humidification. Okay, so initially at point 1, the specific humidity was 0.008, whereas at the final state the specific humidity was 0.014. However, during this entire process 1 to 4, the dry bulb temperature was constant at 26 degrees Celsius. Okay, so this process is nothing but the humidification. Similarly, you will have the dehumidification process, which is the reverse of humidification, where the moisture is removed from the air. Okay, where the moisture is removed from the moist air. So here again the dry bulb temperature is kept constant, whereas the humidity, or the specific humidity, is decreased over here, or the moisture from the air has been removed over here. So this process is the vertical process, which is downward over here. Basically, it will be downward over here. So let's say this is the point number 5, and this process is nothing but the dehumidification. This is nothing but the dehumidification, where the moisture is removed from 0.008 to 0.00 let's say 21. Okay, so that moisture has been removed at constant dry bulb temperature. So this is dehumidification process. Now these are what the separate processes. If I combine any of two of the process, the next processes will be formed. Okay, so let us see next process, that is the cooling and dehumidification. So cooling and dehumidification, fine. So assume that if I am having the psychrometric chart over here, I'll just clear the screen first. Let us. Okay, so assume that I'm having the psychrometric chart, something like that. Okay, and I'm having the process of cooling and dehumidification. I'm having the process of cooling and dehumidification. So initially assume that I'm going for the cooling process. Okay, let's say from point number 1 to point number A, and then I'm going for the dehumidification. Now you know the cooling is nothing but the horizontal process, it's a sensible cooling, and dehumidification, it's a vertical process downward. Okay, so this is the final state. This is the final state over here. This is the initial state. So ultimately the final process will be from point number 1 to point number 2, which is nothing but this particular process. Okay, this process 1 to 2 is nothing but the cooling and dehumidification. This process 1 to 2 is nothing but the cooling and dehumidification. However, in this particular process, 1 to A is the sensible cooling and A to 2 is the dehumidification. Okay, so if I go on the psychrometric chart, so I'll be having point number 1, and then cooling and dehumidification will be something like this. Okay, this will be the cooling and dehumidification process. Let's say this is the point number 6. So this is nothing but the cooling and dehumidification. Cooling and dehumidification. So this is the cooling and dehumidification. Similarly, the next process is cooling and humidification. So instead of having dehumidification over here, I'll be having the humidification. Now you must be understand, if I want to have the cooling and humidification, okay, so assume that I am having the psychrometric chart over here. Okay, this is the cooling process, sensible cooling 1 to A, and then I'm going for humidification, let's say up to point 2. This is the final state. So my final process will be 1 to 2. This is nothing but the final process 1 to 2, which is nothing but the cooling and humidification. So if I want to show that on the psychrometric chart, okay, so here I'll be having the point number 1, and somewhere over here I'll be having the final point. Okay, so that let's say I'm marking the point number 7. This process is nothing but the cooling and humidification. Cooling and humidification, fine. Similarly, this process, the next process is heating and humidification. The next process is heating and humidification. Just a minute. Yeah, so the next process is heating and humidification, this process. So here now you must be understanding, this is the heating and then humidification. So the final process will be something like this over here. Let's say the point number 8, this is the heating and humidification, process. And lastly, I'll be having heating and dehumidification. So heating and dehumidification downward. I'll be having the final process over here. Let's say the point number 9. This is nothing but the heating and dehumidification. This is heating and dehumidification. So these are the various psychrometric processes which are need to be studied for solving the numerical based on the air conditioning. Okay, fine. Thank you.